Unplugged, episode number 55. Sales is fun. I'm your host, Jeff Alish. This is our live show where we discuss different ways to run your IT business, whether it's managed services, consulting, break fix, or anything in between. Let me introduce the co-hosts. We have Paco LeBron from Prodigy Techs. Paco, how's it going?
Well, better than good, better than most, Jeff.
Awesome. And we also have John Fazio from johnfaziojr.com. John, how are you doing?
I am doing amazing. Thank you for having me back on, guys.
Awesome, man. All right, before we get into a little more introduction of John and his background and why he's here, I want to talk a little special about something that's coming up, I don't know, later this year, Paco. Do you remember what that is?
4th of July?
I think it's later than 4th of July.
Labor Day. Got it.
Yep, it's later than Labor Day.
I think what you're referring to is the TechCon Unplugged event that we have coming up in September.
I am.
Well, it's one of my favorite things to talk about too. So, as everyone knows, TechCon Unplugged is coming September 17th through the 19th over in Chicago/Rosemont, right by the airport. We will be at the beautiful Aloft Hotel. Tickets are on sale for $199. We are probably about a week out till we update the website with everything that we've been kind of rumoring, hinting at, teasing, et cetera, et cetera. We still see tickets are being purchased. We really appreciate you purchasing tickets on the Faith in Us. We will be putting all the content and the updates and stuff that are on the website. But, because we're all family here, I'll go ahead and release the 2 vendors that have signed their contracts, and they'll be updated on the website. So we'll be expecting, as our platinum sponsor, we're going to have Huntress over in the show in September, and we will have MSP Sales Revolution and over at September 17th through the 19th at TechCon Unplugged. But they're not the only 2 sponsors that are coming. We actually have now grown probably past the 8 that we had 2 years ago. So a lot of, again, returning vendors, a lot of them that are new vendors. So it should be a very great collaboration between the show. We have a lot of great content. We're going to have a lot of great panels, speakers, things of that nature. You can book a hotel room for $124 a night, I believe is what it was, with free parking. So, in the Chicagoland area, that's a big piece of that because parking can cost you quite a bit. So we were very grateful to have that. And, what do you get for that price of the ticket price? You're going to get a Friday night, Saturday night socials. We're going to have a big shindig on Friday at the hotel. Saturday, we're going to be at Dave & Buster's like we were before. And Saturday and Sunday during the day, we're going to have a lot of great content, as I mentioned before. So head over to techconunplugged.com to either purchase your ticket or sign up for updates. And we will have updates on the site here coming up in the week.
Thank you for that, Paco. And hats off to Paco for doing all the hard work of getting the vendors to come to this show because it's been awesome. And we've had a lot of interest, which is really cool. Plus, the community has really been interested in us doing this again, and that's why we're doing it. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to go on the first one, and it was awesome. So I would definitely recommend going back.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it was fun having you there.
It was a fun time for sure. That was a really good weekend.
So let's go ahead and Paco, you contacted John to come on the show and kind of give a little bit of background, and we're going to let John go into his background for himself and kind of his origin story from there.
Yeah. So what spawned this episode, and I kept meaning to post in the Facebook group that the post that was put on there kind of spawned this episode, is to talk about sales, right? And the post specifically in our private Facebook group had stated, hey, we're looking to get a dedicated salesperson. I'm trying to figure out how they should be compensated. Could anyone elaborate on how to go about doing that? And then that started about a couple comments in there on trying to really get into, what they're doing, what's the percentages, all that stuff. But then I started to think more into it because, I was in this position, trying to figure out, when is a good time for a sales rep, what kind of sales rep you should bring on, because there's different roles in the sales environment. how should they be brought on? Should it be outsourced? Should it be internal? And then the compensation, right? Because I think we all kind of get hung up on how much we should pay them, but we should understand that there's multiple roles of that. So, Faz came up to mind very fast because, everyone has met him at TechCon Unplugged in 2019. He's been on the show before. He has a vast experience in sales. And I felt very confident with his experience that he could, talk to a lot of these points because one, he lives and breathes sales, so he can actually talk on more about that. And he's familiar with our industry. So I figured it'd be great to have him give his perspective on some of those questions and then kind of just go from there. So I'll just go ahead and kick it off to you, John, just to reintroduce yourself again, and we can kind of dive in.
Yeah. No, I like I said before, I really appreciate you guys having me back on. So, very quickly, as far as my background, it's vast. I've done a lot of different things. I started my career in education. I was actually working with kids. I worked with in the childcare system for probably about 7 to 8 years, mostly with kids with disabilities. So right there, you kind of have sort of a keen skill on taking things and making them easy to understand. And, sort of taking those skills and putting it into something like sales is great because you're trying to really break it down to the simplest form. After that, I actually went into radio. So I learned about marketing. Now, radio, marketing, all that kind of stuff is, hugely important when you're building a business because, clearly you need to tell people about the product and what exactly is going on with it and how you get that across. So that was kind of the beginning stages of my career, was kind of learning education and then learning marketing and understanding that side of it. And then I kind of got into sales. I worked for a tech company, a startup tech company, probably pretty big name. I won't even name because I'm not going to give anybody credit. But it was the beginning of kind of learning about the tech side of things. And it was working with MSPs. It was a vendor out there. And I learned more of the sales side of it, but kind of understanding the MSP world. Where did MSPs come from? Who are these guys? What do they care about? What kind of things are they seeing on a daily basis? So then, through the past few years, not only have I done voice over IP, I was doing finance for a bit, but one of my last jobs was working for a training company that did sales, marketing, management training. So right there was really a culmination of all the things that I've had learned in the past, where this is where it kind of makes sense, like that just connection to everything. Outside of, my work life is my passions, which is music. So, when you look up johnfaziojr.com, that's my music. Like that's, again, the passion, but that's also selling too. So for the past 20 years, I've been out playing, bars, restaurants, I've been creating music. So all those kind of things at this point in time in my life have been a combination of some really great ideas, experience, and skills, so that now I have the ability to look back and say, well, this worked and this didn't work, or I've seen this before and I've seen this before. So I want to stick as much as I can in the channel, although, I'm going to be leaving the channel. That's why I was so excited to get back on here with you guys and kind of talk about, sales, because it is the bread and butter. And I feel like I can, possibly help some of your listeners.
That is really cool. Now, I want to ask you a question. This is a little side note, and that is, what type of music do you play?
So that's a good question. I don't really know. And I'll say it, I'll tell you the reason why I say that. I don't think it's a specific genre that I do. I mean, I play acoustic, and I guess I would say more alternative stuff. You can feel free to go to johnfaziojr.com or look me up on any of the streaming sites and check out my music. But I don't know what you would classify it as. And I see that as a extremely good thing.
Yeah, I agree with you. I met you a couple years ago, and I didn't even realize that up until this point, when you mentioned it, actually I knew about it because of the website, but that you actually did music. So that was cool. That was neat to figure.
I think one of the big things that was a big highlight for one of the vendors that John was with was he at an ASCII event won the pitch contest because he turned the pitch into a song.
Yeah, and a 3-minute song.
Yeah, and everyone who had seen those shows that they attended, that's what they remembered. And then that just tells you, like, being memorable in that piece for that, because it was a pitch, drove that even more home. So that was pretty cool.
That is
that's what,
cool.
like, you've realized, especially being in the channel, that it's so easily disrupted. And that's what I'll push to everybody that's listening right now. Like, it's so easily disrupted because they have been doing the same things for years. And, when you go to these shows, you see the people that are in the booths that are sitting behind the booths with all their swag on the table, or you go into it and you look, you're listening to one of these pitches, or even the the workshops that they have. And it seems like the consistency of the workshops is vendors telling MSPs that they're doing something wrong and they should be using them, because if they're not using them, their business is going to be like dead. And like, I just start seeing these things. And I was in the channel, 10 years ago working with a vendor. And then I came back to the channel, 4 years ago, and I'm like, nothing has changed. Like, it's the exact same thing over and over again. So if I can go up on stage and do a 3-minute, song with my guitar, and that's the impact that they're getting for the full weekend that they're there, clearly there's a huge room to disrupt things that are going on right now.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of times, if you've been around this industry for any length of time, you'll realize that a lot of times we get blinders on and we get so focused on doing things over and over again the same way we've always done it because it's comfortable. Yep. And we don't realize sometimes that times are changing and people's attention spans are changing, how people receive information is changing. And there are obviously there's foundational skills that have been around since the beginning of time and they'll still work today. But you've got, like you said, I like the word disruption because that's the next great idea, right? Somebody who can come in the market, disrupt, and go through, have something big that they can move forward with. And I think that's it's key. And sales is one of those things where everybody shrinks away from it because it seems like it's hard. The title of this show is Sales is Fun. I was lying. Most people would say I'd rather stick a fork in my eye than actually do sales.
So what's funny is that I used to be one of those people, and I used to say that sales sucked and that sales was whatever. And I used to talk major stuff about salespeople and, that's a sales guy and all this other jazz. And, and what I've learned, that, and even you've mentioned this, Jeff, a couple of times, that we've all had to sell somebody at some point. Look at our significant others that we have to try and sell our own self to. But, I think that, as you understand that sales is not this dirty word, it's more of it's a nudge. It's an informative way of being able to explain to someone that, hey, if you have this problem, there is a solution out there, and trying to dive into that even more. Right. And that's a huge overview and me simplifying and probably only a section of what it means to be in sales. But that's how I've learned over the years, and just to tone and try and craft that.
Yeah. I think sales is, if you kind of narrow it down, and I take a lot of this stuff from the other company that I worked with, sales is a few seconds of guts. And that's literally what sales is. Sales is just a few seconds to ask a certain question or to say something that, is not typically said. I'll tell you a quick story. So I used to work with an engineer. He was a sales engineer when I first started with the startup company. And he was great. Like, when he would do a demo with a client or a potential client, like, he was very great with the relationship, conversation, everything like that. And I was like, why don't you go into sales? Because plus, he's sort of always complaining about the fact that he's not making enough money. I was like, why don't you go into sales? He's like, I'm not a salesperson. I would never go into sales. Like, the sales is horrible. And I was like, but you have the skills to go into sales. So, you can do that if you want to. And I would never do that. And then what we ended up doing was, again, startup, we were looking for furniture. So we found a place, I think it was like Facebook, and I went and I was going to get these cubes. So, the cubes were pretty cheap. So me and him went to go get the cubes. So we're talking to the person, it's just some random person that they found on Facebook. And once we get the things, he says, hey, he's like, do you have anything else that you guys are, looking to give away? Because, we're looking to take some. Actually, we have some other things if you want to go check it out. Oh, yeah, I'll go and check it out. So goes in there. Oh, this is awesome. Well, what about this? So, what about this? So we ended up walking out with a whole bunch of stuff. And I turned to him and I was like, do you realize that that's sales? Like, do you realize that by you just asking those few questions, like, that's exactly what sales is? And you spend all this time making a little bit of money because you've been afraid of doing the same that you just did, is literally just open up your mouth and ask a question. That's what people are afraid of. Like, that's crazy.
That's true. when you think about it, at the end of the day, I think when people think sales, they think used car salesman.
Yeah,
And they
right.
think scum of the earth, somebody that's just going to steal everything from you, try to steal as much money as they possibly can to give you a junker that you're going to have to repair 3 months down the road. And so that is not the type of sales that we're talking about. We're talking about something that is a lot of times, like you said, John, just a normal conversation that you have by asking a few questions, helping people to understand what they need. Because here's what I will tell you about the human being. Most humans have no earthly idea what the hell they want. They don't. A lot of them just are like, I don't know. There's a lot of times where I would go to, and it's weird because back in the day, I wouldn't want to be sold to. But now I come to a salesperson because I need something from them. I throw up on their desk what I need, and they won't sell me anything. I'm like, just tell me what you got. I mean, give me something. And a lot of times they'll go, well, I'm not really sure what you need. Well, that's why I'm here, because you're the expert in this area. I'm not.
So
I need you to sell me something that's going to help my condition or whatever it is I need.
So I would throw something in there as in saying, I think you're right, as in people don't know what they want, but they do know what they don't want. And that's where a salesperson's job is to figure out is where's the, like, you know, they talk about the pain, right? Like, where's the pain? Where's the issue that you actually have? Where's the problem? And let me figure out whether we can solve this problem with what I have. And I'm going to do the exact same thing when we talk about sales, which is, you know, this first question is, so, you know, when is the right time to bring in a salesperson? So my first question is, why do you want to bring in a salesperson? What's the point of bringing in a salesperson? What's the problem? And then we want to start figuring out, okay, well, let's go down that route. So like, you know, we can even play around with this. So I want a salesperson. What do you want a salesperson for? You know, sales are down. Why are sales down? Let's talk about that as opposed to bringing in a salesperson. You know, I want to bring in a salesperson. Why? Because the product isn't selling. Well, what makes you think that if you bring in a salesperson, the product's going to sell? Let's look at the product and figure out what the wrongs with the product. So It's really kind of going through that, you know, kind of motions, which is keep on asking yourself that question of why. You know, we're not making enough money. Well, why aren't you making enough money? The product isn't selling. Well, why isn't the product selling? Like, is it a sales problem or is it a branding problem? Is it a marketing problem? Is it a, you know, it could be a million other problems besides bringing in a salesperson, which I think that, especially for, you know, some smaller MSPs, bringing in a salesperson may even be your last resort, because there's so many other options that you have right now, especially when it comes to automated marketing and things that you could be doing to pull, you know, actual business in, as opposed to spending your time dealing with, you know, a salesperson that you either have time to manage or you don't have time to manage. And that's going to come even more of an issue with you as opposed to something that's positive.
Well, and I think a lot of people, when they hire somebody, they have this idea that they should hire an expert in their area. And maybe you can get an expert in their area, but at the same point, if you think that you're not going to have to manage that person, you're out of your mind. There's going to be some sort of management that comes along with that.
Manage them, train them, because they may be good at sales, but they may not know your industry, or if they do know your industry, they're not familiar with your business. You know, setting the goals and the process that you want for whichever role of the sales, as the owner to the MSP to the salesperson. So there's a lot more in depth where, other than here, go make me money, you know, and that's what everyone thinks that is going to happen.
Yeah. And that image, that I've heard that so many different times, where, you know, I just want somebody to come in. I want somebody to just hit the ground running. And, you know, maybe even they're bringing in some, you know, some accounts that they had in the past. And like, you're either going to find that person, so you have to track that person down, because that person is not, you know, just out there, you know, swinging their arms waiting for somebody to get, like, they have a job right now. So like, that person that you're thinking about, number one, already has a job, and number two, they're going to be expensive, because nobody's going to come over to your company and going to just blatantly do everything that you want them to do, and you're not paying for it. When I heard from a friend the other day, he was like, he called me up and he's like, listen, somebody just told me that they are getting paid from a vendor $200,000 base. And I was like, that's the stupidest thing that I've ever heard, is a sales manager getting $200,000 base. What's the point of that? There's nothing there that's going to get them to do anything. And that's where, you know, you had brought up the compensation aspect of it. Like, start with step one. What's the problem? And then start going through those other steps to figure out at the end of it if you really want to take on another person. And then you have to break that down, same kind of thing. what are they going to be doing every day? Like, what do they come in and do? And if you don't have the time to manage that, that's your first problem is time. It has nothing to do with sales. And I think that's what people have to do is your first idea of sales are down, I need a new salesperson, or something's happening. You really need to go through that scientific method, which is just break it down and figure out where the real problem is, because it's going to save you a hell of a lot more time and money if you figure out what the real problem is, as opposed to just throwing money at people that most likely will not do what you want them to.
So you basically, John, what you're saying is you should get inside your business and know what is going on. Is that what you're saying? Am I hearing that clearly?
I've heard people say, yes, I've heard, and this is crazy. Like, I'm going to hire a salesperson. I want them to come in and I want them to do 3 sales a week. Like there needs to be 3 sales a week. And I'll ask the question, have you ever done 3 sales a week? Well,
Right.
no. It's like, well, then what are you expecting this person to do? Like, are you serious? Why don't you try to go out there and do it? Why don't you try to sell it? Figure out what the issue is. And if you realize that you're the issue, if you realize that, listen, I'm just not the right person to have this conversation. First off, you have to figure out why, because if you're going to manage somebody else, that's a problem in itself. But secondly, you have to figure out whether it's you that's the problem where you need to replace it, or there's an existential problem that you need to figure out. But yeah, it's really it's funny because I think of like the MSP as kind of that engineer, right? Because you guys are computer guys, like you understand computers. Now, if you took that into people, because that's sort of the difference, right? So like a person, think about a salesperson as a computer. A salesperson is a computer that's being handed to you that was pre-programmed by somebody else entirely, and they're handing it over to you. Now, you could do a few different things. You could be like, who the hell programmed this, and what am I supposed to do with it? Or you can figure out, okay, well, what's the issue here? Like, what triggers them? What exactly is going on? If you don't have the time to do that, to really figure somebody out, you don't have the time to manage salespeople. It's just, that's what you have to do. It's a matter of taking the same thought pattern that you do when you're figuring out how to fix a computer to figuring out how you work this person, to either build them up or, identify what you need them to do. But it's all the same idea. It's just taking the direction towards technology and putting it towards people, because that's what sales is. Sales is people. Sales is emotions. Sales are, feelings and things like that, as opposed to technology, where technology is pretty much black and white. Like, this is how you fix things. People aren't like that. People are, you figure you have 3, 4 different, kind of like Apple, Mac. I don't know what other stuff you have, Linux. Like there's only a few different computers that you have to really pay attention to. Now, if you think about people, each person is a little different of a computer. So you're kind of thinking about, well, now, like I understand Mac, I understand Linux, but I'm going to go to this person that's sort of Mac, but has a little bit of Windows in it, has a little bit of this. How am I supposed to figure this out? That's the job of a sales manager. That's the job of a director. That's the job of a manager in general, is to figure out people just as much as you're figuring out technology and computers.
That's a perfect analogy, because I was just thinking there are a lot of times I will have a customer that asks me, well, how did you fix that? And I will look at them and go, I have no earthly idea. I threw a bunch of stuff at it, some known, some not known, and eventually something in there fixed the problem. Yeah. And I think a lot of times when you look at even technology, if you go, everything is fixable up until the point of replacement. So that's probably a good point, because a lot of times if you're trying to sell to the wrong person and there's no need there, then a lot of times I think people will waste their time. This is not like cold calling where you just call up a bunch of people and go, hey, do you need my stuff? Hey, do you need my stuff? I would think there's a little more into it than that, a little more research, a little more understanding into, like you said, the human emotions, feelings, all that kind of stuff.
Hey, Jeff, do me a favor. Hit your mic. Okay. Because it sounded like it was echoing. So I wasn't sure if that was it. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Mic check.
No, I think that's exactly it. It's realizing that sales is a completely different animal. It's a completely different way of looking at things. And, I would absolutely tell anybody to learn about personality styles, especially if you're wanting to learn about sales. I learned DISC. DISC is very easy to understand, and it opens up the world to you to realize that you can't just say something to everybody the same way, because it doesn't work that way. And that's where, again, going back to that initial question where, my sales are low, so I need to hire a salesperson. Well, let's break that down. Why do you need to hire a salesperson? What's wrong with you being able to go out there and sell? What's the problem with you being able to identify things? And I think that that's where, those managers or those directors really could go through a coaching or, a sales training or whatever it is, so they can kind of get those skills so that they understand, being able to turn that over to somebody else as well. But it's a completely different animal. And so say, for example, you are pitching, your service. So like, first off, you can say that you have the best support. Like every MSP says they have the best support. So when somebody's hearing that, you're saying, listen, I have the best support. And then what if you're going to say, so like, I mean, because you know that, but then, so what if you're going to say, listen, this is what we're going to do. So I'm going to come here on day one and we're going to review your technology. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come next week and we're going to go through what we reviewed. And then 3 months from now, I'm going to come back and I'm going to do this. And then 6 months from now, I'm going to come back and do this. And then I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. Now, for me, as my personality style, which if you understand DISC, I'm an SI. So what that would do to me is I'd be like, wait a second, you got to relax yourself. I don't want to know what's going to happen 3 to 6 months from now because I'm not even there in my head. All I want to know is that you're going to come back next week and you could stop right there, because as soon as you tell me all the other things that you're going to end up doing, I'm going to start getting a little bit scared because I'm like, wait a second, I didn't want all this stuff. All I want you to tell me is that you're going to solve my problem and you're going to come back next week just to check in and see how everything's going. Now, if I'm a different personality style, so if you recognize me as somebody that wants that, and you don't tell me that in 3 to 6 months and a year, this is what's going to happen, my assumption is you don't know what the hell you're doing. So my thought pattern is that, why aren't you telling me, what's going to happen? Because you should know that's what I want. So that's another personality style. You also have that person that doesn't care about any of that stuff, that just wants you to go in there and say, listen, I'll take care of it. I'll let you know if there's going to be a problem. And if you don't hear from me, all is well. There's those people out there too. So in sales, you have to be able to change and adjust yourself on every single conversation that you have. Because if you're not paying attention to how that other person is responding or listening or anything like that, you've missed it. It doesn't matter what you say. If you don't know who you're dealing with, you've missed it. You could say whatever you want. I mean, you can assume that they want to hear that I have the best support, but they could have heard that 12 times before, and you're just like everybody else. I don't need to hear that. It's really figuring out that person, which is the hardest part of sales. If everybody could be doing sales, like if everybody understood that connection, there wouldn't be any telemarketers. I mean, what's a telemarketer, right? It's a salesperson that isn't making as much as a salesperson is. So like, I could be a telemarketer if I want to, but I'm going to learn sales so I can make the money that a salesperson makes. And that's why salespeople are running this world, because they're out there making those conversations, having those connections with people. If you don't think you could do it, find somebody that can help you.
And I think the biggest piece, like you said, too, is like the term I like to use is read the room, right? And it's like just having the conversations, like understanding how to make that connection and that relationship is having the ability to switch that to the personality, to the conversation tone, to, again, reading the room. Because, like you said, you could miss the conversation completely on the points, or they've already checked out because you didn't read what was going on.
Yeah. Or you came in looking a little bit different. I mean, I've literally lost a sale because my shoes were all scuffed up, because I started sales early on. I didn't get that whole image aspect of it and how important that image aspect of it is. I walked into this guy's office. He was, dressed to the T. Like, he was that guy that was dressed really nicely. I had shitty shoes. My shoes in the beginning, I probably show you a picture of them. They're just shitty shoes. As soon as I sat down, I already knew it doesn't matter what I say to this guy. It doesn't matter how I come across, whatever it is, he's already put me down a different level because he saw my shoes and he saw how shitty they were. That's where we're talking about. It didn't matter in the 15, 20 minutes that I was there, whatever I said, I was already down because of the image and perception that this guy had of me. That's what we're talking about. That will make you either win or lose a sale. Could be just something as simple as your shoes.
Yeah.
I think I've always heard in the past too, you want to dress just a little bit better than the person you're talking to, or at least the same, so that you're on the same playing field. And it does make a big difference, because I remember going in for a factory job, And I didn't know any difference. I was young. I was in my early 20s, and I went in for a factory job, and I went in with, slacks, a button-up shirt and a tie. And there's nobody that does that. Even back then, there was nobody. They're like going, what are you doing? I was going in. That's all I knew. Hey, just go in, you dress, the best you possibly can for your situation. And it goes, it goes, farther as it can. So,
so we have, when is it time to get a sales rep? You really have to go through that, questioning, asking yourself. I don't know, how much time do we have? Is it an hour?
About 30 minutes.
Okay, cool. So then the next question was, what kind of sales rep, right? So there's different sales reps that you can have, I guess in the, I don't know, traditional term, you have like hunters and farmers and things like that. Again, it goes back to like, what's the reason? Like, why do you want to have a salesperson? So that in itself is the determination of, where do you want to bring them, or what kind of salesperson you need? Kind of goes back to like, I would try a million things before you bring in a salesperson, because again, there's so many other options out there that you can do to bring in business if that's what the real issue is. But yeah, as far as sales rep, like you have to ask the same question. What do you want them to do? You can go out there and you can get appointment setters. You can go out there and you can get, like, if it's lead generation, I'll tell you a quick story about that. So lead generation, there's a whole bunch of ways that you can get leads. So like, if you're an MSP and you're like, I just don't have quality leads. Okay, well, how can you go out and get leads? Well, first off, there's companies that will, you could charge for a lead. They're pretty expensive. They usually end up being pretty expensive. I've seen like $25 to $50 per lead. And even that, they're just handing you the lead. You don't really know exactly what's going on with it.
Right.
So then they're okay, well, what are the options as far as getting leads? Where can you find these things? Where is it that maybe a vendor or a competitor maybe has, some information that you can utilize? So in my last job, the issue was that we don't have quality leads. So how do we find quality leads? And we don't have that much money to figure out quality leads. So I found out that a competitive vendor had a partner locator on their website. So I'm like, okay, well, then that will show me everybody that has the competitor's thing. It's just basically, it's showing me right there. All I have to do is just look up the area, and I have that lead there. So now the question is, because we've already gotten through, how do I get it? And the question is, okay, well, now we have this website, and we know that it's going to take some time in order to pull the information out. So that's our problem right now. Our problem had nothing to do, has nothing to do with the stuff before. Our problem right now is, how do we get somebody to go onto this website and pull the information that we need? So do we want to do it in-house, or do we want to, get somebody outside to do it? So we question that. Is it worth somebody in-house going through this website and actually doing it? Probably not, especially for the amount of money that you're spending them. So what options do we have as far as going out? So I've used Fiverr in the past. I don't know if you guys have ever used Fiverr before. So I went on Fiverr, and I'm like, I have a guy that had done, some scraping of the internet before. I was like, hey, can you go on this website and pull, there was probably about 4,000 leads there. I was like, how much would it take for you to go on and just pull these leads, put it into an Excel sheet? He's like, I'll do it for $150. Done. $150 on Fiverr. I got 4,000 leads that I knew specifically were using our competitor's product. Now, all I had to do was just go through those steps and taking each of those questions and whatever the word is.
Wow, I can't.
Compartmentalize.
That's the one.
Exactly. Take each of those issues, put it into a box, and shake the shit out of it. That's what you need to do. Any problem that you have, which is, I need salespeople, put it into a box, shake it around. Why do you need salespeople? Let's really dig into that. And what you end up finding out when you do these activities of breaking things down is that it makes it a lot easier to see through the static, to see what the real actual issue is. And once you realize what the real actual issue is, it's a lot cheaper and it's a lot easier to solve that problem, as opposed to sitting back and saying, we have a sales problem. Well, no, we don't have a sales problem. We have a problem getting quality leads. So what do we need to in order to accomplish that? And what's the easiest way to do that? So each of the problems, as far as MSP is concerned, should be looked at the same way. That scientific method. What's the issue? What possible, things can we throw at this? And then just really break it down, and don't look at it as a wide aspect of it. And I'll tell you right now, if you ask anybody, sales manager, coach, whatever, When is the right time to bring a salesperson? How much should I pay them? And they give you a direct answer, run away from them because they have absolutely no idea what they're talking about. There is no direct answer to that question. You have to find out why. What's the reason behind it? And every business has different issues. So for somebody to come in and say, I have your answer, again, run. You have to figure out step by step what's going on so then you can get that one little nugget that's actually going to make a difference.
Well, and it goes back to even when you talk about hiring somebody, any type of employee, and I've said this in the past, but I think a lot of times I tell people that, you know what, wait until the point to where you have no more time, you have no more area to do anything, and you're not going to be able to grow. But I think a lot of people, a lot of times, and John, what I hear you're saying, a lot of people will get somebody ahead of what they really need that person for because they don't know the problem. They don't know exactly what they need. And so, but they think it's a good idea because they think it's that silver bullet that's going to magically just throw them into, millions and millions of dollars, which it never does, but people keep doing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah. And that's it. Like they're looking for that magic bullet. And like people ask that question all the time. So you go on LinkedIn and you're like, how often should I send somebody an email? When should I call them? What's the best times to call them? What marketing should I use? Is it direct mail marketing? Is it, calling up somebody? What's the magic bullet? And the reality is there is no magic bullet because if there was magic bullet, everybody would be doing it. So there is no easy answer to that question. The actual answer is you have to go through the process. Like you have to go through it. And if you're a business owner and you're getting to the point where I have so much business, I can't, I need to bring somebody else in, I would then bring in another engineer. Why would you bring in a salesperson if you have so much work? Then you need that person to work. So you bring in a salesperson when you have more than enough work. And now you want to, really kind of hand that business or whatever off to somebody. Like ideally in a business, you would have somebody that had worked their way from the ground up, right? Like ideally you would have somebody that would come in as like an intern and they would understand the process and then they'd become an engineer. And then that next step, they'd be, a little bit more technical. And then they'd go into being a salesperson and understand the sales aspect of it. And then they'd be a sales manager. And then they'd eventually be the CEO. Like that would be the most ideal situation, is to have somebody come in as an intern and work their way up. But that's not, that's not reality. So as a person, you have to realize that if you're bringing in a salesperson, again, unless you want to spend a whole bunch of money for them to go off and do their own thing, you're going to be working with them. You have to be able to mold them. You have to be able to manage them. You have to be able to give them the right tools that they need in order to do their job. And just as a parent, you have now this child that you need to make feel good. And when they feel shitty about something, you need to figure out how you're going to help them with it, because now that's your job. You're a manager. Or if you're a CEO and you have people underneath you, you're not just a CEO as far as the title is concerned. Right. You have a lot more responsibility of the people that are underneath you, understanding people.
Now you have to actually take the human element of it and understand that, hey, you got to manage people's problems. You have to manage people's, whatever they're running into. You got to run into their interaction with a prospect or a customer, playing firefighter there now, right? So it opens up a completely new set of problems. But like you said, I think what a lot of MSPs that are trying to grow and they hire a salesperson, their assumption is it's set it and forget it. And that's not the case. If anything, you're probably working even more to try and get them going, at least in the initial months, to kind of get that going from there. Right. So for us, we brought in an SDR, a sales development rep, business development rep, because I personally just hate cold calling. I don't have the time. I can't do it. Me and my tech are doing a majority of the work right now. We're okay not to hire another one. Just don't have the time, and I got other things to do, and I rather handle the marketing, because that's a piece that I've outsourced and trying to figure out that piece. So what does that role do? Okay, so this person's going to be responsible for cold calling, sending out digital touches and all that type of stuff or whatever, right? But then the question becomes, how are they going to do that? In what way? How are they experienced? So when you're interviewing, you got to understand what you're looking for too, right? And how you want them to do it, because they may have a completely different style that they're just probably used to hammering the phones and getting just a yes, whereas you need to get the quality of, how are these appointments booked? What are the quality of the appointments? And hold them accountable too if you do go that route as well, because they're just not trying to put in the names on a list.
Has cold calling been a good thing for you? I mean, is cold calling basically what has brought in a lot of business for you?
I would say that alone has not. I think it's a combination of the multiple touches. So we do, depending on what the campaign is, like we have one that we started off with a direct mailer, follow up, email, etc. So we've done multiple touches to try and bring it. I think that the amount of touches is what brings somebody in. And for those that don't know what a touch means, it's more of like the amount of time, the different avenues of how I'm trying to communicate to the customer. So postcard, phone call, email, social media message, etc. To try and get at least, 2 out of the 300 that are made.
What is that list? So what would you say it's about 300 as far as calling?
Yeah, it's about 300 a week. Yeah. So 120 per 8-hour shift.
Okay. And out of those 300, what percentage would you say? So if you thought about your ideal client, the person that, has enough money, enough, staff and everything like that, out of those 300, how many would you say is the most ideal client?
So those all clients are not qualified, but they're all structured toward what we want as a client. So industry, size, and they're all local. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, so the SDR is cultivating the list and then acting on that list.
Okay. So then the other question was, how many other MSPs are in your area?
Oh, I can throw a rock and I'll hit 3 in the face. I mean, there's just so many of them here.
And how many of them are doing cold calling?
But probably more than likely, yeah.
All of them?
I wouldn't know. I mean, I would imagine.
Yeah. So again, this is sort of where we're going through. So
sure.
We're looking at cold calling. So you figure you have, a small enough. So as far as cold calling is for 300 people, you should be able to get through, a salesperson should be able to get through 300, I'd say in probably about a week, maybe 2 weeks. If they're doing it, what they need to do, as far as making the calls, like even if they're doing 25 calls a day, which is really nothing, they should be able to get through 300 in a matter of a few weeks. So the other idea,
I think for us, we do 120 calls. Yeah. Because they're part-time. So I have them for 20 hours. So essentially it's, I think it's 300 because it's 120 for each 8-hour shift and then 60 I'm sorry, let me rephrase. It's 120 touches is what I gauge them on. 60 are outbound calls is how I have that set up. So 150 calls per week is what they do.
When you hired that person, did you think about them walking in to a business?
Yes. However, because of COVID, we decided that probably wouldn't be the best route because A, either they're not there, or B, we don't know how they're going to feel about a strange person walking in with a mask and, hey, if you want to buy from us. But yeah, but that was something we thought about many years ago before we brought it in, but that wasn't a requirement that we had for this person.
So that's sort of where, I love the marketing world because, kind of looking at that line between marketing and sales, like
sure.
I think that marketing is, sort of that quiet monster because really marketing is what is, marketing, branding, all that kind of stuff is what sales is at the end of the day. Like, ideally the phone's just ringing and you're picking up the phone and you're, making the sale at that point in time. So that's the most ideal world. If your marketing and your branding is working for you, then that's what's supposed to happen. What's supposed to happen is the phone's supposed to ring. So if you're going through that motion as in saying, cold calling, because again, cold calling is just something that everybody's done before. And I'm assuming that my competitors are cold calling. So I would think about what else can I be doing? Yeah. My biggest thing was how do we get something in their hands? And the business that I'm working on right now is, not to go too far into it, but basically it's a booking entertainment. So I've been doing entertainment for a long time. And I kind of understand not only the entertainer side of it, but also the bars and restaurants that take entertainers. And the reality is between both of those people, they just don't have time. The bar and restaurant owner is not the one that's, entertainment is not what they typically do. They're a bar and owner restaurant. So they just do it on the side. And typically for entertainers, especially nowadays, entertainment is not what they do as a daily basis. So they don't have time to go out there and do it either. So for this business, my thought pattern is I just need to get something in their hand, because if they're not using my business today, eventually they will be using my business.
Yeah.
So now my thought pattern is, okay, well, let me think about this for a second. So a bar or a restaurant, what would they actually have around? Like, again, I can think about in my world, what would I have around, but I'm thinking about their world. What would they actually keep around? So first off, I'm thinking most likely a bottle opener, one of those bottle openers they're going to have around, like just around.
Yeah. Coasters.
Most likely they're going to have one of those, coasters, like a bar towel. Bar towel seems easy enough. So bar towel, a pen. Most likely they have a pen, like any restaurant's going to have a pen. So now I'm building these boxes where I'm going to be walking into these places and handing them that box. Now I can literally walk in, hand them the box and walk out with my math, doesn't matter. But the whole experience is them opening up that box. And when they open up that box, not only going to see the swag that I put in there, but they're going to understand the company and they're going to see everything that's happening there. Now, that's sales in my mind, where all I'm doing is I'm presenting them with a marketing, product or piece or whatever. In my world, it's this box that has swag in it. But that's selling. I don't have to go in there and say anything. Yeah. It's going to be the experience afterwards when they go, because most likely, again, I'm walking into a restaurant or bar. They don't care about me unless I'm sitting down and eating. They don't care about me until it's their time to care about me, which means that I want to hand them that box. And I'm going to say, when you have some time, open it up. There's a bunch of stuff in there for you. Check it out. If you're interested, let me know. That's selling in my mind. But people don't think about those kind of things because I'm not cold calling. I'm not doing anything. I'm presenting you with an experience. Right. That experience is what I'm selling you. And I think that if MSPs and even salespeople think about, how do I get somebody to experience something? When you experience something, that's a hell of a lot more than being sold whether I want something or I don't want something. If you think about the TikToks of the world, you know, how many salespeople do TikTok have? Probably none. Because they don't need to, because TikTok has an experience and then they've brought people in to experience it. So they don't need to have salespeople. Right. I would say the majority of our MSPs don't need to have salespeople either. They just need to create their brand and they need to understand their marketing. Once those kind of things are done, then the sales essentially should happen.
Speak for themselves.
Exactly.
So it's interesting, right? Because now as you're saying that, I think a lot of us are always focused on the customer experience, but we never take the time to focus on the sales experience and the prospect experience, on how that runs, right? And I think there's other people that say, like, hey, make sure you're picking up the phone and things like that. But like how you just said, like, how do you improve the sales experience and how can you drive that with what you have right now? Don't go up, outside of what you have, right? Like, you don't spend the thousands of dollars a month thinking that you're going to get this magic bullet, but what can you do now that you can achieve and organically and scale to your means? So that's an interesting point I didn't think about.
It's know your audience. And I'll give you one example of a company that I worked for, again, startup company vendor. They were looking at outsourcing themselves. So actually they were going to Europe. So basically they, we're expanding to Europe. So the thought pattern originally was, we're going to do the same thing that we do in the US. We're going to build a business. We're going to get people on cold calls and we're going to do cold calls. And that's, because it worked here, it's going to work there. Again, know your audience. Life is different in Europe. It's different than it is here. We're not just making cold calls. Like, they don't, connect that way. But it took them at least a year, if not more, of spending a whole bunch of money on salespeople, on a whole bunch of things, to realize that all they needed to do was put a bar inside the business. All they need to do was put a bar so that they can then sit down and have a drink with their prospects. That made a huge difference, because there they want to sit down and actually have a connection with you. There it's different. Like in the US, I may be able to actually sell you off of a phone call, but in a different area, they want that connection. So this company, assuming that they're going to, again, the audience is the same as here, right? Let's just do the same things that we do. No. And it could save you a hell of a lot more time and money if you just thought about that in the beginning, which is, who is my audience? What do they care about? What is the pain? What's the issues? And how do I adjust myself for that? The best salesperson is a chameleon. The best salesperson could care less about what's going on with them. All they're doing is just trying to figure out, reading the room and trying to help people as much as they possibly can. That's the best salesperson out there.
John, I have a question, because it's something that we all get a lot, and that is emails from other companies. And a lot of times though, you either get one of two things. You get the, hey there, and here's blah, 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 blah. Here's who I am. Or you get and sometimes they're legit companies that it's not always spam. Well, it's spam if I didn't ask for it, but whatever. That's a different subject. So, but then there's also the, where they actually put your name in. Hey, Jeff, I just noticed, so somebody did a little research, or I'm in a database somewhere where they actually picked real information and got that information. Is, in your opinion, do those emails sell at all?
Having your name to it?
I mean, it's just getting emails in general as a sales tactic. Does that, because I just delete all of them.
So here's what I'll say for that. Again, going on to the different buckets. So that becomes a branding thing. And I've had this conversation numerous times where somebody says, well, if I call somebody up and they don't answer, why would I leave a message? Why wouldn't you leave a message? Or like, are you serious? Why wouldn't you? Because if it's not selling, it's branding. Understand branding as being part of your business. Branding is just that. Branding is hearing my name over and over again. Branding is seeing my, logo over and over again. What that means is that that's marketing. So like if you kind of goes back to expectation, right? I'm going to send out an email and I'm expecting to get a sale from it. Well, that's not the point of sending the email, again, unless the email is specific to something. But maybe your email is just reinforcing your brand. Maybe your email is just getting your name there. Maybe when you leave that message with somebody, you're saying, hey, this is John from johnfaziojr.com. Just wanted to say hi. If they hang up the phone, they heard your name. It's branding. And that's where, again, open up your eyes. We're in a world of attention. Everybody's vying for attention. That's where we are right now. Literally, companies are making millions of dollars off of just attention of people. So attention in general is sparse. You're not just going to be able to walk up somebody or send an email and get their attention. So then your idea is, so what does that mean? That means that I'm branding myself. So yes, I'm going to leave a message. I'm going to send an email. I'm going to, do this. But when it's time to sell, I'm having a conversation with you. Selling is when I'm actually talking to you. Selling is when we can converse, whether it be on the phone or whatever. That's selling. Everything up until that point is marketing. And that's where I think people need to understand. I'm selling when I'm talking to you. I'm not selling when you see an email from me. I'm not selling when you see a postcard. I'm not selling, when you see my logo. I'm selling when I can talk to you. Everything else is marketing.
I like that because you're differentiating between what I think a lot of people in their minds think that sales is, or think that a sales tactic is, that is not. So what we try to do is stop people from fooling themselves, because they do it all the time. And because a lot of them don't know. They don't know what's going on out there, and they don't understand. And this has been a great conversation, just talking about people, talking about how to get in understanding people and the different personalities and stuff like that, in different ways to think about stuff, because at the end of the day, that's really what you need to do in your business. If you're not doing that, if you're not reinventing yourself on a continual basis, you're going to stagnate after a while. And really,
somebody is.
You don't stagnate. If you stand still, you're going to be going backwards. You can't stand still. So you constantly have to be moving forward, but a lot of people get overwhelmed too. So they're kind of like, hey, what do I need to do? And that's why when I think they look for these magic bullets, the silver bullets, to try to get something that's going to move the needle. And at the end of the day, they really need to kind of do an introspective on themselves and understand, okay, what do we need to do here? Because a lot of the stuff you're saying is kind of common sense. Except common sense is not prevalent anymore. But anyways, besides that.
Well, I mean, when you're in the business, that's what it is, especially, owning a business, like there's pressure that goes along with that. And that's completely understood where, I have a lot of conversations with people that are living inside their business. And you've probably heard that millions of times before. Like you can sit there and we used to do that, again, looking at the last job that I was in, we'd spend a lot of time in our own walls. We'd spend a lot of time talking about how we should be doing stuff or how this should work and this should work. And not taking the time to literally walk outside and ask an MSP, like, do you really think that that's what they need? Why don't you ask them and figure that out, as opposed to just coming up with it on your own? And I say the same thing for MSPs, like get out of your building, go into and talk to people. Eventually we'll get to those chambers and things like that, events, but go out there and talk to people. Selling, again, is the best thing that you can do for a salesperson is be face-to-face with them. So ideally, that's selling, is if you could be face-to-face with somebody. So then your job should just be that. How do I get in front of somebody? How do I get face-to-face with them? Whether it be, video call or whatever it is. But as a sales, like, that's selling. The peak of selling is literally talking to somebody one-on-one. Everything else, there's a whole mess of things you could do in order to get to that point. But that's selling. If you can walk into a room and you can have that one-on-one conversation, like, say, for example, you can walk in, like, I've done so many local chamber events. So say there's 20 people at a local chamber event, and you have the ability to walk into a chamber event and have a conversation with 5 people. Now think about your marketing at that point. So maybe you've spent, I don't know, maybe you've hired somebody to do cold calls and you can't get 5 conversations, but you can walk into a room with people around and you can have 5 conversations. You just figured out what your marketing plan is. It has nothing to do with those cold calls. It has to do with you walking in there and talking to people. There's a million and one ways that you can, connect with people. You just have to figure out what the easiest way for you to do that is, and then get out there and do it.
So, John, you've shared a lot of information, and I want to answer the last question that we have on here because we're on our way out. We're at the top of the hour, but and that is I'm sure this is probably not. Well, it depends on how long the answer is, but when it comes to John, it could be very, very long. Which is why we love you, because you bring a lot of great information to think about, and that's really what this show is all about. But how should a salesperson be compensated?
Yeah, great question. So ideally you want to compensate for activity. So depending on where you are in life, the reality is that you should always, especially as a CEO or, a business owner, that you should take care of your people. So as far as like compensation, salary is concerned, you should really look at what is what can you live on? Like, is 20, 30, 40K, like in your area, can you live on 30, 40K? Like, that's great. So then that's what you give them as far as a base is concerned. You never want a salesperson to be fat and happy with their base. Like, that's the stupidest thing you could possibly do. You always want them to live on their base. Like, their base is what's going to keep them, healthy and keep them, eating. And then everything else is pushed towards, what do you want them to do? Do you want them to, cold call? Then you put a vig on somebody that they get for, so you get a base, but every a demo that you get converts gets an extra amount of money, whatever it is. So now you're basically having a base where they're not going to leave because, you've given them enough that they can live. And then your whole job is to figure out what you need and how you compensate them for it. One example is, again, early on company, they were looking at contracts. So they didn't you didn't have to have a contract, but contracts were huge for them. So they wanted their salespeople to sell contracts. Now, originally there was no difference between if you sold a contract or if you sold, not a contract, you would get the same amount. So then you want them to sell contracts, you pay them when they get a contract, because that's where you take the, what they're actually doing and put it towards that. So they're going to be doing the same thing, but you compensate for the activity that you want them to accomplish. And that's what, I think in a perfect world you would be doing for a salesperson, is maybe even every month they have a new activity or new something that they can be doing. Like, it kind of goes back to understanding a salesperson. Your typical salesperson is hungry. They're looking for something. And that's what you want to be able to feed them. I mean, not too much, but you want them to stay hungry. So that aspect of it is, I'm going to, when you get excited about something, I'm going to push it. I want you to get contracts. So every contract that you get, you're getting $100 on top of that. That's going to get them excited. They're going to go out there and do contracts. So you pay towards the activity that you expect them to do. And again, like, give them a life that they can have too.
I agree. That's you couldn't have put it any better, because that's a great way to look at it. And I think that it's the same in the dining out industry with waiters and waitresses and stuff like that. They really, and there's 2 different ways of looking at it, but a lot of times I've always known what these people get paid, so I tend to go above and beyond what normal people tip, just because and most of them do a great job. Yep. But if they didn't have that incentive, I would imagine that my experience dining out would not be anything remote to what it is today. You'd have a few people that would be stellar. I think most would just, it's human condition. I don't care who you are. you're only going to work so hard, and that's just the way it is. But if you have something to work for, you're going to work a little bit harder.
Yep.
So, John, I appreciate you coming out today and sharing all this information. I'm sure we could go on for another 3 or 4 episodes and just dive in,
well,
and we probably will do that. Awesome. But if people want to find out more about you and where you're at, where could they go?
Yes. So send me an email, john@johnfaziojr.com. Again, my life outside of work is music. So my whole world is music. But I want to help people. I want to stay in the channel. So if you are, if you got something from this, you're looking for some coaching, I'm opening up myself in the next few months to do some coaching. I'm going to keep it as a small number. But what that basically means is that we would do an hour call every single week, talk about what happened the week before, talk about what happened the week moving. I had done that when I left my last job. I still have some clients, and I love the ability to do that one-on-one. So if you're looking for help, john@johnfaziojr.com. We'll do a call, see if it's worth doing some coaching. But I'm here to help. And, I've gone through a lot of, I don't know, I like to be able to swear because I don't have any company behind it. I've gone through a lot of shit in my life, and I have the ability to help you with the experience that I've had so you don't lose time and money, moving forward.
Awesome.
Yeah, and just to highlight, I mean, John did a great session at TechCon in 2019 about sales, and he had the worksheets and everything like that. So that just proves to his experience. So for those that want to take him up on that offer as he opens it up, it's definitely going to be worth your while.
I try to get there this year too.
Awesome.
I'm going to be paying for it on myself, so we got some months to make some money.
Sounds good. All right, Paco. If people want to find out more about you and where you're at, where would they go?
Oh, they would tune into this fine programming, Jeff, every Friday at noon Eastern, 11 a.m. Central, or they can find us at TechCon Unplugged in September 17th to the 19th, and they can head over to techconunplugged.com to purchase their ticket.
Awesome, man. You can also watch live and hang out in the chat room over on youtube.com/MSP Unplugged. Subscribe and hit that notification button so you never miss an episode. That's what all the kids are doing nowadays, so do it. And you can also use your favorite podcasting app to take us with you wherever you go, whether you're mowing the lawn, doing some dishes, whatever, laundry, all that kind of good stuff, driving to a client. It's great to listen to some talking heads that hopefully will give some good information, and we hope that that's what we do here. And I want to thank everyone for listening, and we'll see you next time on MSP Unplugged.
Thank you.